Welcome to the Agentic Quality Show, a podcast about how AI is changing testing, quality engineering, and how software actually gets delivered. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Greg Goldshteyn, a quality leader, a QA manager at Fox Networks, and a practitioner who is actively implementing AI solutions in the test engineering. Gregory, welcome to the show.
Yeah, very excited to be here. And I love that this podcast focuses on actually what works in the quality and not just the theory. So at Fox Networks, we are practitioners and our engineering teams are very keen on using the newest technologies as well. So happy to be here.
Amazing. And before we dive into AI, can you briefly share your role at Fox Networks, what you do and type of systems that you work on?
Yeah, I've been in QA for over 25 years now, but for Fox Networks, I've been here for over 7 years, and my specialty is video engineering. So if you've seen Tubi, Fox One, Fox Sports, that's all us. We specialize in the video engineering streaming services specifically. And it's a very challenging platform because we support so many devices that anything that you can stream on, we have to verify and test.
Amazing. And before you started applying AI in your work, what were the biggest challenges that your team faced?
It's usually complex integrations, some of the legacy systems, and migrating to the modern stack at scale. That was the biggest challenge. Also, we had a lot of legacy tests that we had to migrate. We had dashboards, we had alerting and monitoring, and we lack confidence in our test coverage and also maintaining brittle tests, investigating flaky failures. We also had to do manual triggers, we had a CI/CD noise, and when we start actually migrating using AI, that really fixed a lot of those issues.
That's amazing. And those are very common challenges that many teams face today. Legacy systems are especially challenging, right? So I'm really curious now. So at which point did you decide, okay, AI is going to solve these problems? And how did you apply AI to solve some of these problems?
Yeah, so I think we started initially looking at the flaky tests and where the failures constantly were happening. And we wanted to fix test automation as well, becoming more of a performance oriented and solid test executions, solid reporting. And we started with a pilot program where we got introduced into the new IDE is called Cursor, and Cursor was given us this opportunity to start building with agents. And because Cursor kind of matured, we have every access to LLM. We had Anthropic, we had ChatGPT, we had every LLM that you can imagine, like the Google's Gemini as well. So one of the pilot projects that we tried is we fed all the test cases that we had from legacy into it, and we were asking to start rewriting them using Google's Gemini, for instance. So what we've done is traditionally, when we were doing the test, we would have to create a lot of the checkpoints or even test some of the test cases manually. Because when you do visual validation, it's very hard to determine what happens at what point. So to give you like a really quick example, let's say you're watching a Fox Sports event and you have, let's say, 15-second advertisement followed by another advertisement, and let's say you have in a window of, let's say, a minute, 3-4 advertisements. How do you test it using automation tools? It's very difficult, right? Unless you have like a freeze frame by frame. And we decided why don't we record this entire session and we take the session and upload it to Google Gemini and ask for video analysis. And now that becomes almost like a set of human eyes that can look at the video, understand what happened, and then we can use plain English language to ask questions about it. Like, did you see 4 advertisements in a row? Each advertisement was supposed to be 15 seconds long. Did you see transition from advertisement to content? So now you can talk to it as a human being, and that would be like your test cases. That becomes your validation.
That's amazing. So you replace the validation with the calls to LLMs to basically analyze the video. And so your old test cases, they were written using what framework? Like, was it some Selenium or Playwright kind of framework?
Yeah, so usually we had Selenium in the past, or for mobile devices or set-top box TV devices, we used Appium. But even then, they had a lot of those limitations.
And now you replaced it. So what do you use to navigate to these videos? Do you still use a framework, or do you use Gemini or LLM for everything?
So we use an open source framework called Concept.js, which is a JavaScript open source framework itself, using Appium as a WebDriver for that's mobile and TV. On the web interface, we actually use WebDriver IO, and that Concept.js framework lets you pick and choose which driver you want to use, and that's for navigation purposes. But then on top of it, we started using LLMs to do processing. For instance, when you have the session, you can ask the session to capture HAR files. So all the network traffic that happened, you can actually take that HAR file and then again send it to LLM for processing. We don't really have to look for an API call specifically or for particular endpoint. We use just a plain English language to ask, did you see like a watch request, and did you see this value in a header and that value in the response? So again, nothing is hard-coded anymore.
Amazing. And so you started with a Flaky legacy test, right? And then you migrated them to this new system with the, open source navigation tools plus the LLMs. So did you get a chance to measure how much your flakiness improved and all of that?
Yeah, so we had a reporting dashboard, and before we had maybe 20 to 25% failures, whether it's timing related or the content itself was not in sync, and we couldn't really fine tune our test cases exactly because that was causing that flakiness itself. But then, because now we don't really create those test cases with hard-coded values or ambiguous wait times, we rely on LLM to process and to be a source of truth. The failure analysis that we have is much better. Plus, on top of it, what we've built using AI tools is the failure analysis and triage. So the LLM will understand the failures and it will map them out to particular classes. So instead of just giving you a log file that you have to find out yourself what happened, now we have a failure analysis reporting dashboard that every time we run, the failed test cases will be classified, and they will have particular screenshots, and it will tell you possible fixes. What else we can do is we can feed this failure analysis back to LLM and ask agent to fix our failed test cases. So it's almost like self-healing now capabilities.
Yeah, that's amazing. You guys are making huge strides in testing efficiency, test automation efficiency, I have to say. And so you do need a lot of skillful engineers, right? Like probably strong SDATs who can deal with the LLMs and figure out how to build all of this, right? So, and I'm just curious, have you ever relied on the testers without coding experience? And how do you think the teams with the manual testers could approach that?
Yeah, so what's interesting now is there is some major shift that's happening in the industry. And I just was reading recently about Google engineers using 50% of AI agent coding. So when we talk about this AGI, right, the generic kind of human-like capabilities of coding, for instance, Anthropic internally is already using half of the code written by agents. So when it comes to people who don't really understand much of a coding, like junior engineers and or even some manual testers, that actually democratizes some of the testing and writing the code, because now all you have to learn is how to talk to agent. And we had very good success with some of the junior engineers on our teams with a very little training, maybe like in a couple of weeks. You show them the best practices, how to create these agents and build from existing frameworks. And then the agent goes into your framework, it understands what it's trying to do. And the role of the engineer now is more like, you know, an idea generator or reviewer of the work that the agent has done. 60 to 70% of the code for us, even in the test automation world, is driven by the agents. They create PR requests, they create even like Copilot reviews and things like that. So that overhead is very minimal now for us.
I wanted to ask you about how the adoption went, but now that you start talking about agents generating so much code, I also want to talk about the dangers of this, right? Yes, this is so powerful, but have you seen where this approach led to some, failures or something where like, oh, we shouldn't have trusted it with it?
Yeah, I can give you one example. So we use once in a while, like occasionally, third-party tool. I'm not going to name it, but it's actually a vendor tool. And that vendor tool is for test automation purposes that we use on the web, but the vendor also provided us with the MCP server. And when we start using it, we using the agent to create some of the test cases from requirements, it decided to create a user flow, like a sample user flow. And then I don't know why, but it decided that it needs to test it. And instead of testing just one single thread, it sent hundreds of requests to this MCP server, and it resulted in a huge bill for us. Obviously, we had to call the vendor and saying like, "Hey guys, you have to
Wow.
limit your MCP, put some guardrails because it can run away." And it did. It actually ran away from us.
Wow, wow, that's a good story. But let's go back to the adoption, right? So, what surprised you in when you started adopting this new approach in your teams? What was a surprise? What went well and what didn't go well?
I think initially it was quite a bit of resistance when we start doing AI adoption. The positive side was it was faster, but then, as an engineer, we had to still review it. And I think it got better over time, but initially, even like a year ago, the code that was generated, especially with the thinking models, sometimes those thinking models are actually overthink, and they design the code that was just spaghetti, loose ends everywhere. So that actually generated a lot of noise and unneeded code as well, and it required some user reviews. But now I think we kind of streamlined it. There is actually a hidden feature that maybe like not everybody knows, but let's say in a cursor, you can create rules. So instead of the agent being on a wild goose chase and trying to do everything it can, you can actually guide it and put guardrails. So you can say things like, understand their security, make security verifications, understand that you require approvals before you run certain things, right? So you can say, don't let CI/CD pipeline run before my approval. So it will prompt you. So that took like some time to kind of figure it out. But now that we have the rules in place, it becomes much better.
Amazing. So make sure you put the guardrails, and that's basically the adoption challenge in the beginning that you found out. And the other question usually companies face is, when I want to start using AI, should I invest in my own framework, like maybe similarly to what you've done? You build the framework around some of the open source tools, or should I look for the tools outside that I can buy, right? So do I build myself or do I buy? So what are some, you chose to build, I think, yourself in a way, but what are some of the recommendations and thoughts that people should think about when they come to that decision?
I think right now in the industry, there are many vendors that supply some of these solutions, or they build those solutions in their own tools. And I think there are pros and cons. You can go out and buy a solution as well. Especially, it works well if you need a device farm and if you need parallel executions or large-scale test executions, and you cannot scale your own devices, right? So Browser Stack and Lambda Test and all these other vendors, they do have the same solutions that I described, primarily for the web interfaces. The reason why we decided to build our own is because we had certain restrictions. We all needed mobile and also set-top box testing, like Apple TVs and Fire TVs. So those are hard to find. But a lot of banking industry, pharmaceuticals, and so on, they do leverage the vendors, and they do have certain capabilities that are hard to beat, right? Like if you need to run 100 test cases in parallel quickly, they have cloud solutions that can spin up all those instances quick, on a very short upfront time investment. Like you don't really need to have your own labs for that.
Okay. And so if an engineering leader decided that they want to start using AI, but they don't know where to start, and they come to you and they say, hey, where should I what should I start with? So what would your recommendation be to them?
I think the best way to do it would be to have like a small POC project where you start by maybe either converting some existing cases to a new set, or maybe like there is a new project that's coming up and you would like to try, some coding copilots, some LLMs for reasoning and synthetic analysis. And, let's say you had some legacy tools that you used to use and you want to try out how it works with the new tools. And I think, the recommendation is kind of start small and then scale up from there, like learn from your mistakes and then present it to management, right? Management has to have the buy-in. So you need to do kind of show and tell sessions and say, like, here is what we used to have and this is what we have now, and that's how we achieved it, so that they can see the clear path of progression.
Awesome. And now I want to talk about the agentic quality. This is the name of the podcast. So I want to ask you, what does agentic quality means to you?
So to me, agentic quality means systems that act with intent, right? Not just automation that reacts. And AI can observe, it can reason, and it can recommend. But humans set the goals and guardrails. So the AI versus like human ownership would be, AI should own pattern detection, repetitive analysis, or summarization, but humans should own the risk decisions, right? Trade-offs, what's good enough means.
Yeah.
because the guardrails matter most where the AI influences the release, right? You don't start releasing software before you as a human can assess what's the risk and what's the dangers.
Yeah, that's a good definition. Thank you. And I want to talk about how does QA engineer profession is changing with the AI coming into the picture. Now that you guys are doing all of this new cool stuff, what are the skills that QA engineers need and don't need anymore? What should they focus on building?
I think as the skills that obviously prompting, data literacy, judgment, maybe like critical questioning. So if you are a system builder, you have to understand the architecture, what your product looks like. And the idea is you can think of it as AI to be your assistant, but you are the mastermind. So your skill is to understand the application, to become a CME, a subject matter expert, and you are the one who is guiding the AI on execution.
So you have to understand the system. You have to understand the business logic. But if you are building test automation, you should also understand probably like what's good and what's not good, because you can't just blindly rely on AI building test automation, right?
Yeah, so you have to tell it what's negative case. So essentially you can create different type of templates and say like this is a template of my good test case. That's what it looks like. And here's a template of negative test case. And then, you have to give it an example to follow.
Okay. And so right now I have a lightning round of questions for you that we're just going to have a short question and answers before we wrap up the episode. And let's start with one quality signal that you trust the most.
I would say production behavior trends, because I would like to understand what happens from release to release in production and how that release was tested and whether we had any runaway issues and how to remedy that in the future.
Yep, that's right. And one thing teams over automate.
I say like a lot of UI tests. You have to realize we live in a world of APIs and backend plays a huge role. So anytime you can automate through API, do that first.
I love that. I think the pyramid still applies, right? Like, I don't know if it's going to stay with us for forever, but for now, stick with the pyramid, right? All right, next one is one AI capability you're most excited about.
I think intelligent failure reasoning, that's really cool feature. You don't really have to spend a lot of time understanding what failed because you can create the failure reports and it will have a capacity to analyze it as a human being.
Amazing. And one piece of advice for quality leaders in 2026.
I would say invest in judgment, not in tooling, right? So, and also, try to limit fully autonomous release decisions. You would like to be the final judge for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So before we do the last question, any stories that you didn't get to tell that you want to tell?
Yeah, I guess like one of the interesting stories was the story of the multi-agent that we developed internally. And, not many, I guess, organizations actually deployed multi-agents yet. But we do have the agent that we built internally, and we created our own MCP. And that agent can do code reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to how Copilot does, but that agent, what it does, it creates a pull request. It sends, instead of waiting for the human to review, that usually takes a lot of time, or you have to wait for the developer to get to it. What it does, it triggers an automated code review session, and it waits for the, let's say, Copilot to review the code. then it has interactions with the Copilot. So it goes back and forth. So Copilot spits out a review summary, and it will say, okay, you need to fix this and that, right? So then the agent goes ahead, updates the PR by itself with a new code review, addresses all the code issues, sends it back to Copilot, and then if Copilot says, okay, now we're good, then it creates a final PR request and sends it to the developer. So that saves a lot of time for us, especially for the teams that are offshore.
That's amazing. It's amazing how innovative you guys are. And the last question I have for you, what is one practical step that a quality leader can take this month to move to AI-driven or agentic quality?
Practical steps, I would say, look at the AI trends, see what other companies are doing successfully, even if when you look at big organizations like Microsoft and Google and OpenAI, but also look at the smaller blogs on the internet, maybe some podcasts other people come up with. Sometimes even I watch some technical TikTok videos, and you think TikTok is for entertainment only, but you will find some interesting functionality that people come up with. For instance, that MCP for Playwright, there was a guy who actually created test automation and put it up as a video, as a very educational. You can just follow his steps to create test cases, and just try it out and see what the capabilities. They're actually scaling up pretty quickly, and the agents that are becoming available with all the different tooling. Look at MCPs. There are a lot of capabilities around MCPs now.
Thank you. And to add to that, also follow the Context AI and our podcast, because the goal of our podcast is also to educate you on what's happening in the industry and quality and how AI is transforming it. So, Gregory, thank you so much. This was incredibly practical. And I loved hearing about how innovative your company is and how you're on top of the game when it comes to the AI tooling and how it helps you with the efficiency in your work. So thank you for being with us today.
Welcome.